Amina had always believed that hard work could change a person's life. That belief was the only thing she carried with her when she stepped off the plane into a country that felt cold, loud, and unfamiliar. The air smelled different. The people moved faster. Even the language sounded sharper to her ears. She held her small suitcase tightly as she walked through the airport, her heart beating fast. Everything around her felt too big, too bright, too strange. But inside her chest there was still hope. Amina had left her home behind for one simple reason: to build a better future. She wanted stability. She wanted safety. She wanted a life where her hard work would finally matter. The first few weeks were harder than she expected. Her tiny apartment felt empty at night. The silence made her miss home even more. Sometimes she would sit on the edge of her bed and stare at the wall, listening to the hum of the heater, wishing she could hear familiar voices again. Even simple things became challenges. At the grocery store, she struggled to understand prices. At work, she spoke slowly, afraid of making mistakes. Some people were kind, but others looked at her with impatience. Still, she refused to give up. Every morning, she woke before sunrise. She worked long hours, cleaned her apartment, cooked simple meals, and studied new words from small notebooks she carried in her bag. She was tired, but determined. And yet, loneliness followed her everywhere. It sat beside her during lunch breaks. It walked with her through empty streets at night. It whispered doubts into her mind when she lay awake in bed. She missed laughter. She missed warmth. She missed feeling safe. Then one evening everything changed. It was raining heavily that day. Amina stood at a bus stop, holding her thin jacket tightly around her body. The wind pushed cold rain against her face, and the streetlights flickered above her. The bus was late. Her phone battery was dead. And the streets were growing quieter by the minute. That was when she heard a voice beside her. A calm, steady voice. A man stood under the shelter, holding a large umbrella. He looked confident, relaxed, as if the storm around them did not touch him. His name was Daniel. At first, their conversation was simple. Just small talk about the weather. About how unpredictable the city could be. But there was something comforting about him. He spoke slowly so she could understand. He smiled often. His tone was warm, patient, not rushed or annoyed like many others she had met. When the bus finally arrived, he insisted on letting her board first. That small act of kindness stayed in her mind long after she reached home. Days later she saw him again. Then again. It felt like coincidence at first, but slowly their paths crossed more often. He would greet her warmly, ask about her day, offer help when she struggled with directions or paperwork. Daniel seemed to understand her difficulties without making her feel ashamed. When she felt lost, he guided her. When she felt tired, he encouraged her. When she felt alone, he stayed. For the first time since arriving, Amina felt something she had not felt in months: comfort. Their friendship grew quickly. Daniel brought her coffee during her long work shifts. He helped her fill out confusing forms. He listened patiently when she spoke about her fears and dreams. He made promises about the future. Promises that sounded strong and safe. He told her she deserved happiness. He told her she deserved stability. He told her she was brave for starting over. Slowly, Amina began to trust him. Then came the day that changed everything. It happened on a quiet evening. They were sitting together in a small restaurant, the warm lights glowing softly around them. Amina had just finished talking about her worries, about her future, her residency papers, her fear of being sent back home if things went wrong. Daniel listened carefully. Then, without warning, he reached across the table. His voice became serious. He told her he wanted to protect her. He told her he wanted to build a future with her. And then, he asked her to marry him. The words felt too big to understand. Too sudden. Too fast. Amina's heart pounded loudly in her chest. Marriage? The idea scared her. They had only known each other for a short time. Everything had moved so quickly. A voice inside her whispered caution, warning her not to rush. But another voice, softer, more hopeful, told her this might be fate. Daniel had been kind. He had been patient. He had stood beside her when she felt alone in a foreign land. Maybe this was her chance at stability. Maybe this was her chance at belonging. After days of thinking, worrying, praying, Amina said yes. The wedding happened sooner than she expected. It was small but joyful. Friends gathered. Music played softly in the background. Laughter filled the room. Amina wore a simple dress, but her smile shone brighter than anything else in the room. For a moment, everything felt perfect. She believed she had found safety. She believed she had found love. She believed her struggles were finally coming to an end. But as the celebration continued, something small, almost invisible, began to shift. Near the corner of the room, a table held important documents. Marriage papers, residency forms, official records. A guest casually mentioned the paperwork, asking Daniel whether everything had been completed properly. And in that brief moment, Daniel's smile faltered. Just for a second. His eyes flickered toward the papers. A shadow of worry crossed his face, so quick that most people did not notice. But Amina did. A strange feeling stirred deep inside her chest. Not fear. Not yet. Just unease. A quiet whisper that something somewhere was not quite right. And though the music played and laughter filled the room, that small moment would later become the first crack in a marriage that looked like destiny. At first, married life felt like a new beginning. Amina believed she had stepped into the life she had dreamed of, a life filled with safety, support, and belonging. The small apartment she now shared with Daniel felt warmer than the lonely place she once lived in. She woke each morning feeling thankful. Thankful that she was no longer alone. Thankful that someone now stood beside her. But as days slowly turned into weeks, something inside that warm home began to feel distant. Not cold. Not broken. Just far away. Daniel was still polite. Still calm. Still charming in front of others. But when they were alone, he often seemed distracted, as if his thoughts lived somewhere else. Most mornings he left before sunrise. Most nights he returned long after dark. At first, Amina told herself it was normal. Work in this country was demanding. People worked long hours just to survive. She respected his effort and admired his discipline. But slowly the silence between them began to grow. When Amina asked about his day, Daniel gave short answers. When she tried to share her thoughts, he nodded without truly listening. And when she spoke about the future, about building a family, about settling into life together, he quickly changed the subject. Still, she remained grateful. Grateful for his help with her immigration papers. Daniel had insisted from the very beginning that he would handle everything himself. "You don't need to stress," he told her often. "I know how this system works." At first, that gave her comfort. The paperwork confused her. The forms were long and filled with words she barely understood. Having Daniel manage everything felt like a blessing. But slowly she noticed something strange. He never allowed her to see the documents. Whenever letters arrived in the mail, Daniel collected them before she could even reach the door. If she asked about progress, he would smile and say, "Everything is under control." Then he would quickly change the topic. At first, she accepted his answers without question. But doubt, once planted, grows quietly. Daniel's schedule also began to feel unusual. He was often unavailable. Sometimes he left the house without explaining where he was going. Weekends became especially strange. While other couples spent time together, shopping, walking, laughing, Daniel always had somewhere else to be. Work, he would say. Extra shifts. Important meetings. The explanation sounded reasonable. Yet something about them felt empty. Amina began to notice other small details. Tiny things that made her chest tighten without clear reason. One night, she woke up suddenly. A soft whisper filled the room. Daniel stood near the window, speaking quietly on his phone. His voice was low, careful, as if he did not want her to hear. When he noticed her moving, he ended the call quickly. "Just work," he said when she asked. But his tone carried tension. Another time, while cleaning the living room, Amina noticed an unfamiliar sound. A faint buzzing. She followed the sound carefully until she found it, a phone tucked deep inside a drawer. Not his usual phone. A different one. Smaller. Older. Hidden. Her fingers hovered over it, but she did not touch it. Instead, she quietly closed the drawer. Her heart beat faster than normal. That night, she told herself she was imagining things. Maybe it belonged to his workplace. Maybe he kept it as a spare. Maybe there was a simple explanation. She repeated those thoughts again and again, trying to silence the rising unease inside her chest. But the signs did not stop. Bills began appearing that she did not understand. Unexplained expenses. Withdrawals from accounts she never used. Daniel always brushed her questions aside. "It's nothing," he said once, his tone sharper than usual. "Why do you worry so much?" The words stung more than she expected. Amina did not want to seem ungrateful. After all, Daniel had helped her when she was alone and vulnerable. He had married her when she feared losing her chance to stay in the country. She owed him trust. Or at least, she believed she did. Still, loneliness slowly returned to her life. Not the loud loneliness she once felt in her empty apartment. This was quieter. More painful. The loneliness of sitting beside someone who felt far away. Sometimes she watched other couples in the neighborhood, laughing, arguing playfully, walking hand in hand. She wondered why her own marriage felt so different. Why their conversations felt so short. Why their connection felt so thin. One afternoon, Amina met with a friend from work. A kind woman who had always treated her with warmth. They sat together at a small cafe sipping hot tea. At first, their conversation was light, work stories, daily struggles, small laughter. But eventually the truth slipped out. Amina spoke about Daniel's long hours. About his constant absences. About the hidden phone she pretended not to notice. Her friend listened quietly. Then she spoke gently. Sometimes, her friend said, when things feel wrong, they usually are. The words settled heavily inside Amina's chest. Her friend did not accuse Daniel. She did not push harsh ideas. But she warned her softly, not to ignore signs that made her uncomfortable. Trust your heart, she advised. Not just your hope. That night, Amina returned home with heavy thoughts. She tried to act normal. She cooked dinner. She cleaned the kitchen. She waited for Daniel to return. When he finally walked through the door, exhaustion covered his face. But when she carefully asked where he had been, his reaction changed. His expression tightened. His voice grew defensive. Why do you keep asking questions? He snapped. I told you, I'm working. The sudden anger shocked her. Daniel had never spoken to her like that before. Silence filled the room. Thick, uncomfortable. Amina lowered her gaze, her chest tightening with confusion. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. But deep inside, doubt had already begun to take root. A quiet voice whispered inside her mind, growing louder each day. Something is wrong. Something is hidden. Something is waiting to be discovered. And though she tried to ignore that voice, the shadows inside her marriage were beginning to stretch longer. Soon, those shadows would lead her toward a truth she was not ready to face. The feeling of doubt did not arrive all at once. It crept into Amina's life slowly, like a shadow stretching across the floor at sunset. At first she tried to ignore it. She told herself that marriage required patience, that trust was the foundation of love, that every husband and wife faced challenges in the beginning. But deep inside, something had already begun to crack. One afternoon, while Daniel was at work, Amina decided to clean the apartment. Cleaning always helped calm her mind. It gave her something to focus on when her thoughts became too heavy. She moved slowly from room to room, dusting shelves, folding clothes, organizing drawers. Everything felt normal, quiet, peaceful, until she reached the bedroom closet. Daniel's jacket hung neatly on a hanger, slightly heavier than usual. As she lifted it to place it properly, something slipped from the inside pocket and fell to the floor with a dull sound. Amina froze. Her heart skipped once, then began beating faster. She looked down. A small phone lay near her feet. Not Daniel's usual phone. Another one. The same hidden phone she had once noticed inside the drawer weeks ago. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The weight of it felt heavier than it should. She stared at it for several long seconds, her chest rising and falling slowly. A voice inside her whispered, "Put it back." Another voice whispered louder, "Check it." Her fingers hovered over the screen. She hesitated. Her breathing became shallow. She knew that once she unlocked that phone, there would be no turning back. Trust, once broken, could never be whole again. Still, curiosity mixed with fear pushed her forward. With trembling hands, she pressed the button. The screen lit up. Unlocked. No password. That alone made her stomach twist. Her eyes moved slowly across the screen. A list of messages appeared. Dozens of them. All from the same number. No name. Just a string of digits. Amina swallowed hard. Her thumb moved carefully, opening the conversation. The first message she read made her chest tighten. The words were short, simple, but too familiar. Too intimate. Her eyes moved quickly down the screen. Message after message. Each one deeper than the last. Words filled with warmth. With closeness. With affection that did not belong to a stranger. The messages spoke about missing him. About waiting for him. About wishing he would come home sooner. Amina's breath caught in her throat. Her vision blurred slightly. She scrolled further. Her fingers grew colder with each message she read. There were plans mentioned. Promises made. Moments shared that she had never known about. One message stood out more than the rest. It spoke about weekends. About how much someone looked forward to seeing him every Saturday. Saturday. Her chest tightened painfully. That was the day Daniel always disappeared. The day he claimed to be working long hours. The day he left without explanation. Amina felt the room spin slightly around her. Her knees weakened. She sat slowly on the edge of the bed, gripping the phone tightly. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it echoing inside her ears. No, this cannot be real. There must be an explanation. There must be a mistake. She forced herself to breathe. Slow. But the air felt heavy inside her lungs. Just as she prepared to scroll further, she heard something. A sound from outside. Footsteps. Approaching the door. Her heart jumped violently in her chest. Daniel. He was home. Too early. Panic rushed through her body. Her hands moved quickly. She closed the messages. Turned off the screen. Placed the phone back inside the jacket pocket exactly where she had found it. Every movement felt rushed, clumsy, desperate. She stepped away from the closet just as the front door opened. Daniel walked inside. His footsteps echoed through the apartment. Amina, he called. Her throat felt dry. I'm here, she replied, forcing her voice to sound calm. He entered the bedroom moments later. His expression looked tired, but normal. Too normal. Amina forced herself to smile. But inside, her world had already begun to shift. Daniel removed his jacket and placed it carelessly on the chair. Her eyes followed every movement he made. Every step. Every breath. Every glance. She watched him differently now. Not as a loving wife, but as someone searching for truth. Why are you home early? She asked carefully. Work finished sooner, he replied without hesitation. His answer sounded smooth. Practiced. Too smooth. Amina nodded silently. But her mind was racing. Every word he spoke now felt suspicious. Every movement felt calculated. That night, she lay beside him in bed, wide awake. Her eyes stared into the darkness. Sleep refused to come. Her thoughts moved endlessly. The messages replayed inside her mind again and again. Missing you. Waiting for you. Come home soon. The words echoed like whispers in her head. Beside her, Daniel slept peacefully. As if nothing had changed. As if nothing had been discovered. That peaceful sleep made her chest ache. How could he sleep so calmly, while her world felt like it was falling apart? Days passed. But nothing felt the same. Amina began watching Daniel more closely. Not openly. Not obviously. Quietly. Carefully. She paid attention to the small things. How often he checked his phone. How he stepped outside to answer calls. How he lowered his voice whenever he spoke to someone late at night. Daniel, meanwhile, grew more distant. More distracted. More absent. Their conversations became shorter. Their meals quieter. Their home colder. Amina felt as though she was living with a stranger. Not the man who once stood beside her in the rain. Not the man who promised protection and safety. But someone else. Someone hiding behind a mask. The loneliness returned stronger than before. Only now it carried fear along with it. Sleep became difficult. Some nights she lay awake until morning. Her thoughts refused to rest. Her chest remained tight with worry. At work she became quieter. Withdrawn. Her coworkers noticed the change. But she kept her pain hidden behind forced smiles. Inside, her heart felt heavy with suspicion. Still, she needed proof. Not guesses. Not feelings. Proof. Slowly she began collecting small details. She wrote down dates when Daniel left early. Noted times when he returned late. Remembered words that did not match his actions. Tiny pieces of truth. Each one small on its own. But together, forming a picture she was afraid to see. With every passing day her fear grew. Her trust faded. Her heart hardened. And deep inside her chest, one painful thought began to settle. The man she married. The man she trusted. The man she believed was her destiny. Might be living a life she knew nothing about. A life filled with secrets. A life filled with lies. And though she did not yet know the full truth, she could feel it coming. Slowly. Silently. Like a storm gathering in the distance, growing darker with every passing moment. By now, Amina's life had become a quiet battle between hope and fear. Every morning she woke with the same heavy feeling pressing against her chest. It felt like something terrible was waiting just beyond her reach, something she could not yet see but could already feel. The apartment no longer felt safe. It felt like a place filled with secrets. Daniel still acted normal, at least on the surface. He spoke politely. He smiled when necessary. He continued making excuses about work and long hours. But to Amina, everything about him now felt different. Carefully planned. She no longer believed his words the way she once had. Instead she watched, waited, collected small details in silence. One morning she received a message reminding her about an important visit to a government office regarding her residency papers. Daniel had promised to handle everything, but that day he claimed he was too busy to accompany her. "I'll finish it later," he told her quickly before leaving. But something inside Amina refused to wait any longer. She decided to go herself. The government building stood tall and gray, crowded with people from different backgrounds. Some waited patiently, while others argued softly with officials behind glass windows. Amina stood in line, holding her documents tightly. Her palms were sweating. Her thoughts raced. What if something was wrong? What if Daniel had not been honest about her papers? What if? She forced herself to breathe slowly. Step by step, the line moved forward. Eventually, she reached the counter. The officer behind the desk flipped through her documents carefully. His expression remained calm, but his silence felt heavy. Amina watched his face, searching for signs of concern. Finally, he spoke. "There are still missing documents," he said. The words hit her like a sudden slap. "Missing?" Her heart skipped painfully. "But my husband said everything was submitted," she replied quietly. The officer shook his head slightly. "No, not everything." Cold fear spread through her body. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. Daniel had promised. Again and again. He had said everything was under control. So why were things missing? Why had he lied? The officer handed her a list of required documents. As she stepped away from the counter, her legs felt weak. Her thoughts became louder, sharper. Something is wrong. Something is very wrong. Feeling overwhelmed, she stepped outside the building, needing fresh air. The afternoon sun felt too bright against her tired eyes. She walked slowly toward a nearby market, hoping the movement would calm her racing thoughts. The market was crowded and noisy. Vendors called out loudly. Children laughed. People hurried past one another carrying bags filled with food and supplies. Normally, the noise would comfort her. But that day, everything felt distant, blurred. She stopped at a fruit stall, pretending to examine the produce while trying to steady her breathing. That was when she noticed her. A woman standing just a few steps away. Tall, graceful, calm. There was something familiar about her face, not familiar in memory but familiar in feeling, as if fate itself had placed her there. Their eyes met briefly. The woman smiled politely. Amina returned the smile out of habit. Moments passed. Then the woman stepped closer. "Excuse me," she said kindly. "Do you know where the nearest pharmacy is?" Her voice was warm, gentle. Amina pointed down the street, explaining the direction carefully. The woman listened attentively, nodding with gratitude. "Thank you," she said. "You're very kind." There was something sincere about her tone. Something that made Amina feel unexpectedly comfortable. The two women stood quietly for a moment longer, exchanging small talk. Simple questions. Where are you from? How long have you lived here? Ordinary words. Ordinary conversation. Yet beneath it all, something felt strange. Unsettling. The woman introduced herself. Her name was Zainab. Amina repeated the name softly, committing it to memory without knowing why. As their conversation continued, Zainab began speaking about her family, her husband, her home, her daily routine. At first, Amina listened politely. But then, something changed. Zainab mentioned her husband's work schedule. Long hours, weekend shifts, late-night responsibilities. Amina's chest tightened. Her breath slowed. That sounds familiar. Too familiar. Zainab continued speaking, unaware of the growing storm inside Amina. She described her husband as hardworking, responsible, protective. Amina felt her fingers grow cold. Her heart beat louder with each passing second. Then came the moment that made the world feel still. Zainab mentioned her husband's name. Daniel. The sound of that name struck Amina like thunder. Her ears rang softly. Her vision blurred for a moment. But she forced herself to remain calm, silent. So, there are many Daniels in this city. That must be coincidence. It must be coincidence. She repeated that thought again and again, desperately holding on to hope. But Zainab kept speaking. She described him physically. His height, his voice, his smile. Every detail matched perfectly. Amina felt the ground beneath her feet shift. Her chest tightened painfully. Still she said nothing. She could not speak, could not breathe properly, could not think clearly. Zainab laughed softly while speaking about how her husband often worked late but always made time for weekends. Weekends. That word echoed loudly inside Amina's mind. Weekends? The same days Daniel always disappeared. The same days he claimed to be working overtime. Cold dread spread slowly through her body. Her hands trembled slightly. But she hid the movement carefully. Zainab remained unaware. She smiled warmly, unaware that her words were slowly tearing another woman's world apart. Eventually their conversation ended. Zainab thanked her again and walked away. But Amina remained frozen in place. Her heart pounded violently inside her chest. Her thoughts collided painfully inside her mind. Daniel. Weekend shifts. Same description. Same behavior. It cannot be coincidence. It cannot. Fear rose like cold water inside her veins. That evening, when Daniel returned home, Amina watched him silently, carefully, closely. Every movement now carried weight. Every word sounded suspicious. Later that night, she did something she had never done before. She checked his schedule. Carefully. Quietly. She searched through small details, notes, receipts, calendar reminders. And slowly, the truth began to reveal itself. Daniel had lied. Not once. Not twice. Many times. His weekend work schedule did not exist. There were no extra shifts. No meetings. No official duties. Only empty lies. Her hands trembled as she sat alone in the dim light. Fear pressed against her chest like a heavy stone. She no longer feared suspicion. She feared truth. Real truth. The kind that destroys lives. The kind that shatters hearts. For the first time since her marriage began, Amina felt something deeper than doubt. She felt dread. A quiet, creeping dread that told her the answer she was searching for might break her completely. And though she did not yet know the full truth, she could feel it waiting, closer now than ever before, waiting to reveal itself, waiting to change everything. After meeting Zainab, Amina's world no longer felt steady. Every step she took felt heavy, as if the ground beneath her feet had turned soft and uncertain. Her thoughts moved in circles, repeating the same questions again and again. What if it's true? What if Daniel is living another life? What if everything I believed was a lie? That night she barely slept. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Daniel's slow breathing beside her. The sound, once comforting, now felt unfamiliar, almost frightening. She turned her head slightly and looked at him in the dim light. His face looked peaceful, calm, innocent. But her heart refused to believe what her eyes saw. She remembered Zainab's words. Her husband. Weekend shifts. Same description. Same habits. The same name. Daniel. Her chest tightened painfully. No, she thought. I need proof. Not guesses. Not fear. Proof. The next few days passed in quiet tension. Amina moved carefully, pretending nothing had changed. She smiled when Daniel spoke. She cooked dinner. She cleaned the house. But inside her mind was planning. Watching. Waiting. Then one Saturday morning, Daniel prepared to leave the house, just as he always did. He dressed quickly, avoiding eye contact. His movements felt rushed, nervous. I have work, he said briefly, grabbing his keys. The same excuse. The same lie. Amina forced a small nod. But this time, she was ready. She waited exactly 5 minutes after he left. Her heart pounded violently inside her chest. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her coat. Today she would follow him. Today she would find the truth, even if it destroyed her. Outside, the air felt cold and sharp against her skin. She walked quickly down the street, her eyes searching for Daniel's figure. There, just ahead. He moved with confidence, unaware that someone watched from a distance. Amina stayed far behind, careful not to be noticed. Every step she took felt dangerous. Her breath came faster. Her chest felt tight. Still she continued. Daniel boarded a bus. Amina followed. She sat several rows behind him, lowering her head slightly so he would not see her reflection in the window. Her hands gripped the edge of her seat tightly. The bus moved through busy streets, passing buildings she had never seen before. This was not his usual work route. Her fear grew stronger. Stop after stop passed. Finally, Daniel stepped off. Amina followed again, keeping distance between them. Her legs felt weak, but her determination pushed her forward. Daniel walked confidently through a quiet neighborhood. Clean streets. Neat houses. Children playing outside. Families moving peacefully from place to place. He slowed as he approached a small, well-kept house with white walls and blue curtains. Amina stopped behind a nearby tree. Her heart pounded louder than ever. This must be work, she told herself desperately. Maybe he has a second job. Maybe this is harmless. Maybe. Daniel walked toward the front door. Then something happened. The door opened before he could knock. And standing in that doorway was Zainab. Amina's breath stopped completely. Her chest froze. Her fingers tightened against the rough bark of the tree. Zainab smiled brightly, warmly, lovingly. Not the polite smile of a stranger. The smile of someone welcoming home the person she loved most. Daniel stepped forward. And then, he hugged her. Not casually, not politely, but with deep familiarity, with comfort, with belonging. Amina felt her knees weaken beneath her. Still she could not move, could not breathe, could not look away. Then came the moment that shattered everything. A small child ran toward Daniel from inside the house, laughing, excited, calling out happily. The child threw their arms around Daniel's legs. Daniel bent down and lifted the child into his arms. He laughed, a real laugh, warm, joyful, full of love. Not the distant, tired smile he showed at home, but genuine happiness. The sight cut through Amina's heart like a sharp blade. That was not just a meeting. That was not just a visit. That was family. His family. Her vision blurred with tears. Her chest tightened painfully. The truth was now standing directly in front of her. Clear. Undeniable. Daniel was already married. He had a wife. He had a child. He had a life. A full life, hidden behind lies. Amina felt the world spin around her. Her breathing became shallow and uneven. Air refused to fill her lungs. She pressed her hand against her chest, trying to steady herself. Memories began flashing through her mind. Daniel standing beside her in the rain. Daniel promising protection. Daniel asking her to marry him. Daniel smiling during their wedding. Every memory now felt poisoned. Built on deception. Her legs trembled as she leaned against the tree for support. Her heart pounded violently. She wanted to scream, wanted to cry, wanted to run, but her body refused to move. Across the street, Daniel carried the child inside the house. Zainab followed closely behind him. The door closed gently, as if nothing had happened, as if nothing had been destroyed. Amina stood there alone, frozen, silent, broken. Tears rolled slowly down her cheeks, hot, unstoppable. She covered her mouth with trembling hands to stop herself from making a sound. Her thoughts became louder, harsher. He lied. He used you. He married you for papers. The realization struck her like lightning. Everything suddenly made sense. The missing documents, the hidden phone, the late-night calls, the weekend disappearances. It had never been about work, never about responsibility, never about sacrifice. It had always been about deception. Daniel had married her not out of love, but out of convenience, out of selfishness, out of greed. A deep pain spread through her chest, heavier than anything she had ever felt before. Not just heartbreak, betrayal. The kind of betrayal that destroys trust completely. The kind that leaves scars that never fully fade. She slowly stepped away from the tree. Her movements felt weak, unsteady, but she forced herself to walk. One step, then another. Her tears continued falling silently. She did not look back. She could not. Looking again would only deepen the wound. The streets blurred as she walked. Sounds faded around her. The world felt distant, as if she were moving through a dream she could not wake from. Her mind replayed the scene again and again. Daniel hugging Zainab. Daniel lifting the child. Daniel laughing. That laughter echoed painfully inside her chest. That laughter did not belong to her. It never had. By the time she reached home, exhaustion filled her body. Not physical exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion. The kind that drains strength from the soul. She entered the apartment slowly. Everything looked the same. The furniture, the walls, the quiet rooms. But nothing felt familiar anymore. Nothing felt safe. She sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands rested on her lap. Still trembling. Still cold. Her thoughts repeated the same painful truth. He married you for papers. Not for love. Not for partnership. Not for family. Just for papers. Amina lowered her head as fresh tears filled her eyes. Her heart felt shattered into pieces too small to repair. Yet even through the pain, she made one silent decision. She would not scream. She would not beg. She would not confront him yet. Not until she had proof. Not until she had strength. Not until she understood everything. But inside her chest, something had already broken beyond repair. Trust, love, belief, all gone. And as she sat there in silence, holding her shattered heart together, Amina knew one painful truth. The life she thought she had built had never truly existed at all. After that day, silence became Amina's closest companion. Not the peaceful kind of silence that calms the mind, but the heavy kind that presses against the chest and refuses to leave. She moved through the apartment like a shadow, cooking, cleaning, smiling when necessary, pretending nothing had changed. But inside, her heart felt shattered beyond repair. Daniel returned home that evening as usual. He walked through the door with the same tired expression, the same quiet greeting. He placed his keys on the table, loosened his jacket, and moved around the house like everything was normal. Like he had not spent the day laughing with another family. Like he had not broken her world into pieces. Amina watched him silently from the kitchen. Her hands rested on the counter, gripping the edge tightly. Her chest burned with anger. Not loud anger. Not explosive anger. Cold anger. The kind that stays hidden behind calm eyes. "Long day?" she asked softly. Her voice sounded steady, but inside, her heart trembled. Daniel nodded. "Yes, very long." The lie came easily. Too easily. That was what hurt the most. Not just the betrayal, but the ease of it. The comfort he had with deception. Amina lowered her gaze, forcing herself not to react. Not yet. Not until she had control. That night, she lay awake again, staring into the darkness. Her mind replayed memories she once cherished. Their first meeting in the rain. Their wedding day. The way he once held her hand and promised protection. Every memory now felt like poison. Every promise felt like a trap. She thought about confronting him. About standing in front of him and demanding answers. But another thought held her back. What if he denied everything? What if he twisted the truth? What if he made her seem crazy? No. She needed strength. She needed proof. And most of all, she needed control. Days passed slowly. Pain followed her everywhere. At work, she struggled to focus. Her hands moved, but her thoughts remained trapped in the past. Sometimes she caught herself staring blankly at nothing, lost inside painful memories. Flashbacks haunted her mind. Moments she once ignored now returned with sharp clarity. Daniel hiding his phone. Daniel avoiding questions. Daniel leaving every weekend. All the signs had been there. Right in front of her. Yet she had chosen trust. Chosen hope. Chosen love. Now those choices felt like mistakes. Foolish mistakes. One evening, while sitting alone in the living room, Amina allowed her thoughts to wander into darker places. Revenge crossed her mind. The idea came quietly at first, then grew stronger. She imagined exposing him publicly, destroying his reputation, making him feel the same pain he had caused her. The thought filled her with temporary satisfaction, but only for a moment. Soon after, guilt followed. Heavy, uncomfortable. Revenge might feel powerful, but it would not heal her heart. It would not erase the betrayal. It would not rebuild her life. She sighed deeply, pressing her hands against her temples. What do I do now? The question echoed inside her mind. Late that night, her phone vibrated softly beside her. She reached for it slowly, expecting a work message or reminder. But when she looked at the screen, her breath caught in her throat. The message was from an unknown number. Her heart began beating faster. Slowly, she opened the message. It was Zainab. Amina froze. Her fingers trembled slightly as she read the message again. Zainab did not know the truth. Her words were kind, simple, friendly. She thanked Amina for helping her at the market days earlier. She even suggested meeting again sometime. The message felt innocent, warm, unaware. Amina stared at the screen for a long time. Her chest tightened painfully. Zainab was not her enemy. She was another victim. Another woman living inside Daniel's web of lies. That realization changed something inside Amina. Her anger shifted, softened, turned into something heavier, sadness. Not just for herself, but for Zainab too. Two women, two lives, both built on the same deception. Amina lowered her phone slowly. For the first time, she understood that this situation was bigger than her own pain. Much bigger. The next morning, a new thought formed in her mind. Clear, steady. She would not scream. She would not fight blindly. She would not act out of anger. Instead, she would act with purpose. She would gather proof. Carefully, patiently, step by step. That decision gave her strength. Small strength, but enough to move forward. She began paying closer attention to everything. Receipts, documents, phone activity, schedules. Every small detail became important. She searched quietly through files when Daniel was away. She copied important information onto paper. Dates, times, addresses. Each detail added another piece to the puzzle. Sometimes her hands trembled while writing. Sometimes tears blurred her vision. But she did not stop. She refused to remain powerless. Meanwhile, Daniel continued living his double life. unaware that the woman he thought he controlled was slowly uncovering his secrets. One afternoon, while organizing old papers, Amina found something unexpected. An official document, partially hidden, folded carelessly. Her heart raced as she unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the page carefully, and there it was. Proof. A marriage record. Not hers. Another one, dated years before he met her. Her chest tightened painfully. Her worst fears had now turned into undeniable truth. Daniel had not only lied, he had committed fraud. He had married her while still legally married to another woman. Her hands shook as she held the document. Tears filled her eyes again. But this time, something else burned beneath the pain. Determination. Strong. Unbreakable. She was no longer just a victim. She was becoming someone stronger. Someone prepared. Someone ready to fight, not with anger but with truth. That evening, she sat alone by the window watching the fading sunlight. Her thoughts moved quietly now. More focused. More controlled. She knew what she had to do. Not revenge. Justice. Not shouting. Evidence. Not emotional confrontation. Legal action. She inhaled deeply, steadying her breathing. For the first time since discovering the truth, she felt a small sense of direction. Not peace. Not happiness. But clarity. And as darkness slowly filled the sky outside, Amina made a silent promise to herself. She would expose the truth. Not only for herself, but for Zainab. For the child. For every lie Daniel had told. And though the pain inside her heart remained heavy, she was no longer lost. She was preparing. Waiting. Gathering strength. But soon, the truth would no longer remain hidden. And when it finally surfaced, Daniel's carefully built world would begin to fall apart. After days of quiet planning, Amina was no longer the same woman who once trusted easily and loved deeply. Now she moved with caution. Every step she took had purpose. Every action was guided by truth, not emotion. Inside her bag, she kept the evidence she had collected, carefully organized papers, copied records, dates, and messages that slowly built the real picture of Daniel's life. A life she was never meant to see. A life built on lies. The hardest part was not gathering proof. It was living beside him while knowing the truth. Daniel still acted normal. He still smiled when he came home. Still asked simple questions like, "How was your day?" Still played the role of a husband who cared. But to Amina, every word now felt empty. Every smile felt fake. Every moment felt like a performance. And she was done pretending. One morning, after Daniel left for work, she made her decision. Today, she would end the silence. She would bring everything forward. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the documents into a folder. Not from fear anymore, but from the weight of what she was about to do. For a moment, she sat quietly on the edge of the bed. Her mind flashed back to everything. The rain. The proposal. The wedding. Zainab's face. The child. The lies. Her chest tightened, but she did not cry this time. She had no more tears left for confusion. Only truth remained. Amina stood up, took a deep breath, and walked out. The first step toward justice. The government office felt colder this time. Not physically, but emotionally. Last time she had come here, she was confused and unsure. Today she was clear. She walked directly to the counter and asked to speak with someone in charge of immigration matters. Her voice did not shake. That surprised even her. When she was finally called in, she placed the folder gently on the desk. "I need to report something," she said calmly. The officer looked at her, then at the documents. As he started reading, his expression slowly changed. Confusion first, then concern, then seriousness. He flipped through page after page. The room became quiet. Too quiet. Amina watched carefully, her heart beating steadily. Not fast. Not chaotic. Controlled. When the officer finally looked up, his tone was firm. "These documents suggest fraud," he said. The word landed heavily in the room. Fraud. Amina nodded once. "Yes," she replied. "I believe my husband has been lying about his identity and marriage status." The officer leaned back in his chair, clearly taking this seriously now. "Are you sure about this?" Amina hesitated for only a second. Then she spoke. "I am sure. The investigation begins." Within hours, things began moving. Officials started reviewing records, checking databases, cross-verifying information. Amina was asked several questions, but she answered everything clearly. No emotion. No hesitation. Just facts. By the time she left the building, something irreversible had already started. The truth was now in motion, and it would not stop. Zainab learns the truth. That evening, Amina received a call. It was unexpected. Her hands froze as she saw the name on the screen. Zainab. For a moment, she did not answer. Her chest tightened. But she knew this moment would come. She finally picked up. Zainab's voice on the other side was shaky, confused, afraid. Amina, is it true? She asked softly. Amina closed her eyes. Silence stretched between them. Then she replied gently. Yes. That single word broke something on the other side of the line. Zainab went quiet. Then came a soft sound, like someone struggling to breathe. He told me. I was his only wife, Zainab whispered. Amina's throat tightened. I know, she said quietly. More silence followed. Two women. Two broken truths. Connected by one man's lies. Finally, Zainab spoke again, her voice shaking with pain. I have a child with him. Amina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of those words. She understood everything now. Not just betrayal. Not just deception. But destruction of two lives. I'm sorry, Amina said softly. And for the first time, Zainab cried openly. Daniel's world starts to collapse. By the next day, officials had already contacted Daniel. He was called in for questioning. At first, he tried to act calm, confident, in control. He walked into the office like nothing was wrong. But that illusion did not last long. When the documents were shown to him, his expression changed. For the first time, his confidence cracked. This is a misunderstanding, he said quickly. But his voice was weaker now, less certain. The officers remained firm. There is no misunderstanding. The records are clear. Daniel tried again. He explained. He defended himself. He shifted stories. But every word he spoke only made things worse. Because truth does not bend easily. And his lies were already exposed. The unraveling. As investigations deepened, everything came out. His secret marriage. His false claims. His hidden life with Zainab. His marriage to Amina under false pretenses. Piece by piece, his world collapsed. People from his community began to hear whispers. Then facts. Then proof. The image he had carefully built, the polite, hard-working, responsible man, began to fall apart. People stopped trusting him. Colleagues distanced themselves. Friends turned away. Even those who once defended him went silent. Because there was nothing left to defend. Amina watches justice take shape. Amina did not attend every hearing. She did not need to. She already knew the truth had taken over. For the first time since everything began, she felt something different inside her chest. Not happiness. Not relief. But justice. Quiet. Slow. Real. Daniel's control was gone. His lies were no longer hidden. And the power he once held over her life had finally broken. Still, there was no celebration in her heart. Only exhaustion. And acceptance. Because justice does not erase pain. It only stops it from growing further. The fall is complete. Within weeks, Daniel's life had completely changed. He lost his credibility, his stability, his freedom to control the narrative. The consequences of his actions followed him everywhere. And this time there was no escape, no manipulation, no excuses strong enough to save him. Karma had finally caught up. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. And as Amina stood at a distance, watching everything unfold, she understood something important. Truth does not arrive quickly. But when it does, it changes everything. And this time, it had changed her life forever. After everything collapsed around Daniel, silence returned to Amina's life. But this silence felt different now. It was no longer filled with confusion or fear. It was filled with space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to heal. The days after the investigation were slow and quiet. Amina spent most of her time alone, sitting near the window, watching the world move outside while her own life slowly tried to rebuild itself. For a long time she did not feel strong. She did not feel happy. She simply felt empty. Like something inside her had been taken and never returned. But slowly small changes began to appear. One morning she woke up and noticed something unusual. Her chest no longer felt as heavy. The pain was still there, but it was softer. Less sharp. Less suffocating. She sat up, placing her feet on the floor, and took a deep breath. For the first time in weeks, she did not feel like she was drowning in her own thoughts. Facing the reality, Amina began accepting what had happened. Not forgetting it, not excusing it, but accepting it as part of her life story. Daniel had lied. Zainab had suffered. And she had been caught in the middle of a life built on deception. There was no changing that truth. And somehow, accepting it made it easier to carry. Pain that is understood becomes easier to survive. A quiet meeting with Zainab. One afternoon, Amina met Zainab again. This time there was no confusion between them. Only understanding. They met in a small, quiet place away from noise. At first, neither of them spoke much. It was strange seeing each other after everything. Two women connected by the same man, but divided by pain. Zainab's eyes were tired. Amina could see the exhaustion in her face, not just physical but emotional. Finally, Zainab spoke. "I trusted him completely," she said softly. Amina nodded. "So did I." Silence followed. But it was no longer uncomfortable. It was shared. Understanding slowly replaced anger. Not forgiveness yet, but something close to peace. Zainab looked down at her hands. "I don't know how to explain everything to my child," she whispered. Amina felt a deep ache in her chest. She understood that pain too well. But she also realized something important. They were both still standing, still breathing, still alive. And that meant life was not over. Only changed. Rebuilding from broken pieces. After that meeting, something shifted inside Amina. She began taking small steps forward. Not big ones. Not rushed ones. Just steady steps. She started going out more. Walking in the morning air. Eating properly again. Sleeping without waking up in fear. She returned to work with a clearer mind, even if her heart still carried scars. People around her noticed the change. She was quieter now, but stronger. More grounded. No longer trying to pretend everything was fine, but no longer letting pain control her either. Rediscovering herself. For so long, Amina had defined herself through survival, through struggle, through relationships that shaped her pain. But now she began asking a different question. Who am I without the betrayal? Slowly, she started remembering parts of herself she had forgotten. Her dreams, her goals, her independence. She began studying again in her free time, planning for a future that did not depend on anyone else's promises. Bit by bit, she rebuilt her identity. Not the version shaped by Daniel's lies, but the version that existed before him. Stronger, wiser, more careful, but still hopeful. A new kind of strength. One evening, as the sun set outside her window, Amina sat quietly with a warm cup of tea. The light outside turned soft orange, filling the room with calm. For a moment, she closed her eyes. And instead of pain, she felt peace. Not complete healing. Not perfect happiness. But something real. A beginning. She understood now that healing was not about forgetting what happened. It was about learning how to live after it. And she was learning. Slowly. Step by step. She had survived betrayal. She had survived heartbreak. And now, she was learning how to survive herself. And for the first time in a long time, that felt enough. Time moved forward, even when Amina felt like her world had stopped. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the weight in her chest became lighter. Not gone, but easier to carry. Amina no longer woke up with fear pressing on her heart. The memories of Daniel still existed, but they no longer controlled her thoughts every minute of the day. She had learned something important through pain. Healing does not mean forgetting. It means surviving, and then living again. Learning to forgive herself. One quiet morning, Amina stood in front of the mirror. She looked at herself for a long time. Not the broken version she once saw, but someone stronger. Someone who had been tested by betrayal and still remained standing. For a long time she had blamed herself. For trusting too quickly. For believing too deeply. For not seeing the signs sooner. But now she finally understood. She was not foolish. She was human. And trusting someone who pretended to love her was not her failure. It was his choice to deceive. For the first time, she whispered softly to herself, "I forgive you." And it was not for Daniel. It was for her own heart. A cautious step forward. Amina began rebuilding her future with quiet confidence. She focused on her work. She continued her studies. She saved money. She made plans that did not depend on anyone else. Her life was no longer centered around love or fear. It was centered around growth. She still smiled sometimes when she remembered small, good moments from the past, but they no longer hurt as deeply. They were just memories now. Nothing more. A changed understanding of trust. One evening, as she walked home under the fading light, Amina thought about everything she had learned. She had once believed that love meant safety, that marriage meant honesty, that kindness meant truth. Now she understood something deeper. Not everyone who smiles is safe. Not every promise is real. But that did not mean the world was empty of good people. It only meant she had to choose more carefully. Trust would come again one day. But slowly. carefully, wisely. Final reflection. As she reached her apartment, Amina paused for a moment before entering. She looked up at the sky. The evening was calm, peaceful. And for the first time she did not feel trapped by her past. She felt free from it. Not because it never happened, but because it no longer owned her. Inside her heart, a final truth settled gently. Deception may hide for a time, but it never stays forever. And truth, no matter how painful, always finds its way out. Amina stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Not as the woman who once believed a lie, but as someone who had survived it, and was finally ready for whatever came next.